Hey everybody, I'm back with another review, and today I've got my G-Shock GST-W310 G-Steel midsize. I like this watch a lot, and if you've probably figured out, I don't have too many quartz watches, but this is one of the few that I have and I like to wear. So actually, let's do a wrist check today. So today I've got on a ball, excuse me, bumped the camera, ball Trainmaster Legend. It's a 40 millimeter that wears pretty big, and I'll do a review on that at a later date. Sorry about that, let me adjust my focus. Trying a new setup today, so we'll see how this works out. As usual, we'll start with the dimensions. So this is a 55.9 millimeter lug to lug length. It is a 49.3 millimeter in diameter, and it is 15.3 millimeters thick. So I think the mid-size in the name is sort of a misnomer. It really isn't mid-size by any means. I've got a 7-inch wrist, and despite this being quote-unquote mid-size, this still wears really, really big and heavy for me, and I'm a big dude. Well, let's start with what I like. So it's built really well. And as opposed to some G-Shocks where you can see some sort of molding seams where the resin is molded or injection molded, I don't see any on this piece. And that's a good thing to see, especially considering that this watch is just under $300 gray market. And the dial has some nice texture. It's got a lot of depth, so you can see it's kind of got a sunburst effect, but it's got lines that sort of cross the dial. You've got the sub-dials in a standard black on white LCD, not a reversed LCD, and I've had problems of reading those reversed LCDs in the past, so I was happy to see that this didn't have a negative LCD. And then the indices, they actually look like they're applied, and they're not. So according to G-Shock, those are painted on to add to the shock resistance because applied indices that are applied tend to break loose when the watch is dropped, and on here they won't do that. For a G-Shock, I think this piece is actually pretty mature and refined. It wouldn't look too out of place in a business casual setting. And the features really make this kind of an awesome watch to use as an everyday watch. So it's got, let's go through it. It's got solar powered, so you never need to replace the battery. They say you never need to replace the battery, but I've heard the capacitor in here lasts anywhere between 10 and 15 years. The watch itself has world time, so it's a pretty neat feature. If you get a world time, if I wanted to switch to world time, I hit these two buttons and the dial moves on its own. So I thought that was pretty neat. If you want to return back to your home time, you just hit the two buttons again and it's back. It's also got a stopwatch like most G-Shocks. It's got a countdown timer. You can set in increments of seconds, I think up to 59 minutes and 59 seconds. You've got, I believe, 5 different alarms. 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. You've got 5 alarms. And then your standard display. And you can choose between, you can choose between displaying the date or the current time. This also has multiband 6, which means it receives signals from the atomic clock every night. So even though the quartz module in here is pretty darn accurate, you'll know that it's accurate to the second as long as you're in one of the regions that falls under the range of the atomic clock transmitting tower. So I think multiband 6, I think there are 2 in Japan, 1 in China, 1 in Germany, 1 in the United States, and I'm forgetting where else the last one is if I've missed one. But to see whether you've received the signal, you hit the button down here, and it'll say get. And as you can see here, it was able to receive it last night at 12:04 a.m. You can also force it to get a signal by pushing and holding. And you'll see here that it says RC with the exclamation point on the right dial. And that shows that it's trying to receive a signal. Once it does receive a signal, you'll see down here LMH, which is normally low, medium, or high for the battery power. But on here, when you're in receive mode, it shows you the reception of the atomic clock tower. So I thought that was pretty neat. And then one of my favorite features is the full auto LED. So if you push the button, the whole dial lights up from the bottom, and then the subdials are also lit too, which is a problem on some lower end Casios or G-Shocks. You don't see the subdials lit up by the LED, but it's also got full LED. So if I push and hold this, now if it's dark, every time let's see if it'll do it. Come on, buddy. Let me make sure this is on. Give me a sec. There we go. So if it's dark enough and you tilt your wrist, you'll see that it turns on, which is really useful when you want to check the time with one wrist. So a really cool feature. And then, as with all G-Shocks, or all modern G-Shocks, it's water resistant to 200 meters, which is awesome. You can use it for swimming, snorkeling, skin diving, etc. And the bracelet on here is pretty nice. I think these are solid links. And they feel really solid. I mean, this is stamped steel here at the bottom, but it works. And I don't know of too many watches in this price range that don't use stamped steel in the clasp. And then finally, I actually like the mineral crystal on here. I know a lot of people prefer sapphire crystal, but in a G-Shock that's meant to be tough, a sapphire really doesn't have any place on that kind of watch. Sapphire is hard and scratch resistant, but then also makes it brittle, so a hard bump anywhere could potentially shatter the crystal, whereas mineral crystal tends to just crack, which means you don't get shards of glass or shards of crystal in the movement. I'm also happy they didn't go the plastic route, although plastic is probably the most durable and probably the most suitable for a G-Shock. If most people who wear a G-Shock aren't using it in really extreme situations, they don't need that kind of elasticity in the crystal, and they would probably prefer more scratch resistance. So I think that's why the mineral crystal works better here. What I don't like about this piece, this isn't a midsize. I know the name says midsize, but let me show you on wrist. I've got 7-inch wrists, so my wrists aren't. They're pretty medium sized, and I'm a pretty big dude. But despite that, it wears massive on me, and I know it's probably fine. There's no lug overhang over my wrist. Wears all right. It feels heavy. I think when I weighed this, it was over 180 grams with the bracelet. But if you're into big, solid, kind of chunky watches, I would say go for it. But for me, I was hoping that I could wear this G-Shock in an office setting, and it would probably work if I were wearing, say, a polo shirt, so you're in a more casual office. But suit and tie, or even just a dress shirt and a pair of slacks, this will not work. It's too thick to fit under a dress shirt cuff, and it just doesn't look refined enough when you're in that kind of environment. Something else I don't really like, the resin case here. It looks like the G steel in its name from the front, but from the side you can tell that it is a resin case, and although it's very well done resin, I would have hoped to see a steel case. And that's something that Casio has remedied in the most recent GMW B5000 release, which is awesome. I'm a big fan of the DW5600, and I'm happy to see an all-steel case version of that. So I'll probably pick that up as soon as the prices go down. But here, I was hoping for a steel case, and I didn't get it. And then I'm kind of nitpicking, but the lume on here is pretty fantastic. It looks to me like Superluminova C3 on the hands only, but the indices don't have any lume. And that's not a big deal because you can always activate the auto LED and you can see the dial just fine. But in the middle of the night, sometimes when you want to check the time, that LED is super eye-searingly bright, and I would like to see just a gentle glow. And while the hands work when you're kind of looking at it from an angle, the indices, or having glow-in-the-dark indices, would really help with the orientation and figuring out what time it is. And then finally, I dislike G-Shock's proprietary bracelets. This one, as you can see, I think the width looks like 24 millimeters, but it's screwed in. Completely proprietary. There's no spring bar in here to speak of, which is probably a good thing because spring bars typically are the weak point of a bracelet. But at the same time, this bracelet itself has pins that keep it connected. I don't think the pins are that much stronger than a spring bar, and it would have been nice to have bracelet or strap options on here other than the stainless steel or a rubber strap. And if anything goes wrong with this bracelet, I think you're kind of SOL as far as finding a replacement bracelet. I think you might end up having to pick up a new watch, which is unfortunate because this is a good watch. It's a pretty cool watch. But seeing as it's stainless steel on here, it's probably going to be all right. So, like I said, I'm probably just nitpicking. But all in all, there is a lot to like about this watch. You probably can't pull it off at the office. Or maybe you can, if you're a little bit more daring than I am. But I find it a little bit too big, a little bit too heavy, and probably a little bit too long on the lug to lug. And I can't seem to fit it under a shirt cuff. But for business casual, or sort of a do-it-all travel watch that can go from meetings to, say, swimming pool, and adjust to the world time, this is a really convenient piece, and probably one of the best travel watches you can get. All right, well, I would probably move straight to the beauty shots. I don't know if the lume is that impressive that I want to take a photo of it. And anyways, you guys saw the LED. So, yeah, I guess thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.